Sorry, I need the mic. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Renz. I'm with Rocketwagon Venture Studios, an IoT venture studio here in Chicago. We provide line of sight into IoT innovations for our corporate investors. And if you think about the Internet of Things, we are at an interesting inflection point. Kevin Ashton coined the phrase the Internet of Things in 1999, and a lot of people ask me, so why is this the year where things are really going to take off? And depending on how many devices you think there is today, some people say it's 12 billion. We think we're going to see 200 billion devices by next year, then 500 by 2030. And this is Mr. Chambers from Cisco, so he obviously has an opinion on this. And if this is happening, which we happen to believe it is, this can be 15 times as big as the previous three waves, which was mobile, internet, and PC. And if you think about this, again, I know this is a technical conference, so I'm not going to explain the Internet of Things to you. But if you really think about the opportunity that exists in the cyber-physical world, that the average Joes have not yet begun to understand as much as we use our smart devices, etc., there's a significant opportunity here. And going back to my question, what is different now? I do believe that distributed ledger technology is going to play a key role in the enablement of the Internet of Things, and I'll talk a little bit about this specifically around new mobility, which is connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, which is my area of focus at Rocketwagon. And before I go any further, can I assume that all of you have a basic understanding of how the blockchain works and what blockchain is? I see nodding, everyone? Okay, yeah. Very good. So the way I always explain this in very layman's terms is, there was a time when we shipped products, cars, any other product. The product became smarter, it became connected, and the product system is really the first of its iteration. This is Porter Heppelman. And if you think about Tesla is now one example of such a system, right? Here's a visionary CEO who says, hey, if I just give people electric vehicles, they're not going to be using them because they have to charge them as well. And so he built a charging infrastructure. He also looked at over-the-air updates to make the car more capable every single update, right? And so he can put new software on a hardware platform that allows the vehicle to do more, give more assistance to the driver, etc. He also looked at the power wall from a house charging perspective and looked at the tiles on the roof. So that to us is a connected electric car ecosystem, and he can do things now with this ecosystem that a traditional OEM in Detroit or in Germany cannot do. And so if you think about this next step, which is that system of systems, which we also view to be human-centric, then you start seeing opportunities in this Internet of Things as we start correlating the data. The previous speaker spoke about the vast amounts of data that are being produced by these devices. And again, I believe that DLT can play a key role here. But if you now look at that human-centric system of systems, and again, this is a mobility focus, you can apply this to any of your own industry, and you start looking at your digital content, you look at your previously mentioned connected car platform, but also your on-demand mobility services, the implications of energy, etc. You as a human would start to have an avatar that has hopefully an onion level type of a model where you can own your own data and you can start sharing your own data in ways that you feel comfortable with, because the way it's currently being done by Facebook and Google and some of the other companies, it's pretty creepy. In exchange of free email and free navigation services, they vacuum clean our data to the terabytes, again, that we've heard before. So for us, the Internet of Things and the DLT is this next version of the World Wide Web. And for that, we have to have digital identities for people and for things. And these identities have to be ensured that they have integrity, that they have security, and they have the privacy. Because again, certain data might be something that you only want to share, for example, with your healthcare provider. Some other data you might be more comfortable with. If you have an Apple Watch and you have a heart disease history, you might want to share it with a hospital of your choice, but you want to share it in a tokenized way. So this is what we mean by these digital identities of people and things, and their DLT plays a key role in the sense that it not only authenticates the source of the information, but it also makes sure that the data stream is immutable. And so if you think about these devices now starting to communicate with the rest of the world, you want to make sure this is really a sensor that is communicating this information, not a 14-year-old kid in his basement in Naperville or something like this. And so this, again, is where we see DLT to play a key role. We then go into the secure connectivity and the peer-to-peer arena. If you think of the machine economy, which is the Internet of Things, these billions of devices will sooner or later start communicating directly to each other and will no longer rely on a platform that verifies them. And, again, the car is always an easy example because all of us use some form of transportation in the last 48 hours. But if you really think about what does Uber really do as a platform, it authenticates the driver, gives the route information, does the charging, and then for you, gives you an app. But this can be done peer-to-peer as well between you / your avatar and the car itself once it becomes self-driving, or even before it becomes self-driving. And so again, this tokenization of assets, the transfer of ownership, all these kinds of things can be enabled by distributed ledger technology. And then last but not least, the instant financial settlement, which to me is an interesting point when people look at applications in distributed ledger technology. One of the mistakes that I believe we are making is that we look at existing business processes that exist today that are running on a mainframe, on a client server, in a cloud. And I believe that's the wrong approach. We have to look at the very, very long tail of business processes that are currently not monetized by you as a business, or have a business model that is sustaining it. And for that, again, DLT can be a very interesting use case. And I do, as you can see on the copyright, I do work with the IOTA Foundation out of Berlin, Germany, which is a third generation distributed ledger technology. There's no block, there's no chain. It's a directed acyclic graph that is a minorless approach to DLT. And the reason it has to be minorless, let's put the fact that climate change is upon us to the side, is that going back to this monetization of these business processes, if it takes me 30 minutes to generate a block and it costs me $15 to do a transfer from one machine to the other, I again take away this long tail of business opportunities that exists. But if I have a protocol like IOTA that can do this frictionless, meaning because there's no miner, there's no fee attached to it, and I can move data from a point to a point and do these peer-to-peer enable that peer-to-peer, this machine-to-machine economy without, again, an intermediate in between, that's where these billions of devices will translate into a business opportunity that is really going to be that next version of the World Wide Web. And the other thing that IOTA has done extremely well is they have found a way. We just heard usually when they throw more load onto a system, it goes slower. The tangle is built in such a way that the more transactions that are running on the tangle, the faster it goes. And so this is really designated and designed only for the Internet of Things. And I can stand here all day and tell you how great it is. The proof is really in the pudding, and the proof is that there's a lot of large corporations that are looking at DLT, as you know. And for these IoT use cases, they are starting to look very heavily on IOTA. The challenge ultimately is in all of the DLT world that it's a new technology, so we're going down the permission-based route, which I always compare to the intranet versus the intranet, and clearly it's much safer for a multi-billion-dollar company that's publicly traded to stay behind its firewall. But the real promise of DLT is in the permissionless environment, the intranet version of this. And for that, again, we have to have the identities sorted out, and we have to be able to do these settlements in a very quick and very easy way. My example always is if my car drives down Lakeshore Drive at 50 miles an hour, I'm not going to wait for 30 minutes for my traffic light to change. So these things have to be settled instantly. And you can move data, but you can also attach a payment service to this if you choose to do so. So if you think of this economy of things, dual sources of trust, and the machines start generating data, one of the other points that we just heard the previous speaker talk about is how much data is being produced. A modern car is producing up to 4 terabytes per hour. And one of the big challenges that I think we have today is that this data is not being downloaded at the end of the day to the vendor's cloud infrastructure. So if you're driving I always use Volvo because no one is afraid of the Swedes, and everyone thinks they're nice people, which they are. But if you drive a Volvo and you read their T's and C's very carefully, it also talks about that they will share the data with countries that do not live up to the same data privacy laws as we are used to in the States or in Europe, namely China, because Volvo is owned by a Chinese company. And so as you pull in with your Volvo at the end of the night, the data gets downloaded into Sweden, and then it makes its way to China, and then it becomes part of this lake of terabytes or petabytes we just heard of big data that is, as you know, less than 5% is being used. So instead, what we envision is that we stay on the edge, we stay on the fog, and we contextualize this data, which is extremely important. The other day I was on a panel with a gentleman from State Farm, and he talked about the app that they have to make you a better driver. And he, in his opening remarks, said he got dinged twice on his way from the office to the venue where we spoke. One was he was braking too hard, and the other one, he was in the curve a little bit too much speed. And I challenged him on this because the fact that he had to brake very hard means absolutely nothing to me. It means if my grandma or my wife just crossed the street and the car had to brake really hard to save her life, then you should get a point on the good side, not on the bad side, just because he was braking hard. So the data in itself, without it being contextualized, it means nothing. And one of the big points that we do at Rocketwagon Venture Studios is we look at what we call the first receiver. Instead of taking the data that IoT devices generate and push them all into the back office cloud of the individual vendors, and if you think of a McDonald's franchise, between the fryer, the HVAC system, and the electricity alone, all that data goes into the back office clouds of these large companies. And then the company decides what the franchisee can see and what HQ can see. Instead, we should keep this data on the edge in the fog, contextualize it when the fryer is 1 degree over its normal operating temperature, but it's 100 degrees outside and the HVAC is down. That's much more meaningful information than just to push data streams back for the sake of pushing them back. And so this is, to me, another promise of the Internet of Things, the Internet of Value. But again, we need the enabling technology, which is DLT. And we obviously didn't coordinate the slides here, but here is an example of a smart community where, again, we have the opportunities of the electric vehicle, paying different chargers. We're becoming prosumers, so we're not just consuming energy, but we're also generating excess of it. We could sell this. And this all has to happen in a very frictionless way. We track the insurance based on our usage and our use cases. We incent people, hey, do you really have to be in the office at 9 o'clock? There's a traffic jam. If we delay you by 30 minutes, we'll give you a voucher for something. There's a lot of very, very interesting use cases that we can see. And again, if you haven't noticed it yet, I'm not the most technical person, even though I do have an engineering degree, but it's been a long time since I practiced it. For me, the technical innovation without the business part is useless, right? I don't want to build things just for the sake of building them. I want to build them because they make sense and they can generate money or they can solve a problem. And if you think now about business models in the machine-to-machine economy, once these devices start trading resources with each other, and it becomes a true peer-to-peer IoT environment. And the economist talks about data being the new oil. If this data is very valuable and this is being run over data marketplaces, we have to have this DLT technology enabled to, again, authenticate the sources of the data and also make sure that the data is immutable. In the smart sharing economy, if you think about anything that has a chip can be shared, how many of us have a drilling machine at home because we needed that one hole 5 years ago and the rest of the time the thing lays around? And there's some usage-based models already today. If you look at the airline industry, the engine provider, might it be Rolls-Royce or whoever, United doesn't buy the engine anymore. They pay for the engine only when it runs. So when United makes money, when the plane is running, that's when they pay for the service. So they have a completely different relationship. Rolls-Royce wants to make sure the plane can fly, all the analytics that are coming off the plane, et cetera, et cetera. And then last but not least, data privacy. I'm originally born and raised in Germany. Europe has gone ahead with the GDPR, the Data Privacy Act, and most people know it as the right to forget, but there's a lot of other components to it. And California has this now passed for next year as well. And so now you're starting to, when you ingest data like we just heard, you have to be very, very careful in how you ingest it, because if my new friend that I met at lunch, Jay, calls you up and says, I want you to suspend the use of my data because I don't trust you anymore, Google, whoever the vendor is, you have to know where Jay's data is, and you have to be able to suspend, you have to be able to correct, you have to be able to identify to him or whoever is asking this question, where do you use this data? And again, for those type of data stems, distributed ledger technology is going to be massive. And if you start participating in Internet of Things and you have all these sensors that are coming through, the previous speaker was talking about there's certain things they do and certain things they don't do. It's in the end of the day an end-to-end business model that you are sustaining and you are charging your customers for, ideally, that you have to be very, very clear on how you're dealing with your data and where you get the data from. I mentioned The Economist already. This is from last year. Data is the new oil. All you have to do is look at Facebook's market cap. I mean, they don't have a product. You are their product. I'm no longer on Facebook. That's why I can say you, not me. But it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and they're selling the information to different folks, and there's a lot of money to be made. And clearly, when these billions of devices come online, there's only going to be more and more data that is being available, but again, less than 5% of big data is being used. Why is that? And you know this for your own organizations the best. It is these data silos. Effectively, I don't care. In my case, before I joined Rocketwagon Venture Studios, I was in business with my brother, so we're a two-man band. We have data silos. There's a couple different versions of emails. My proper name is Jochen, but I go by Joe. This is data inconsistency is always the problem. And if you try to aggregate this and bring this to a level where you can monetize the data, because it is the new oil, and clearly the FANGs have done a great job in starting to scratch the surface on this. But if you think about how much Google really knows about you, about your location, about your behavior, right? There was a recent article in one of the New York newspapers where they could identify, first of all, they know it's your phone, right? Then they know if you're male or female. If your phone is at a parenthood clinic for a certain amount of time, you can start figuring out relatively easily why the person is at that facility. If it's a male person, you can figure this out, right? This is, again, contextualization, but in a very, very creepy way. And if you want to do this without in a creepy way, and there will always be people, and we have a generation now that is not as concerned about privacy as maybe my generation is, but in the end of the day, if this data is so valuable, why am I paying for the phone? Why am I paying for the plan? So that Google can give me, again, free Gmail and free navigation services. So these data marketplaces, and IOTA happens to have one of those, can then be able to provide inputs into machine learning. We heard a little bit about this from Vijay. It's very tricky on how you train your algorithms, and you want to make sure that the data you're training it with is pure and is proper. And these kind of opportunities are now just coming to the surface. We have a company here in Chicago called Here. They provide, for example, map information to Audi and BMW and those kind of folks. And they are dealing now with issues where my data in itself is worth nothing. I could not go to the marketplace and sell it to anyone. But if I combine my data with her data, then it becomes meaningful and I can sell it to someone. So now I have a business model where I sell this contextualized data to someone, but how do I pay her and me? Because our data in itself is zero value. And if we have bots and we have our avatars represented in these marketplaces, I can decide how I want to share my data down to a very, very granular level. And my favorite example, and again, I'll use very simple examples, not to insult your intelligence, but I always want to make sure I have a common denominator, is that my driver's license, if I go for a drink tonight, what does it say on my driver's license? How old I am, how much I weigh, at least when I got my driver's license, how tall I am, if I'm an organ donor, where I live. Who cares? All they need to know is give this guy a drink or not. And so in the world of DLT, my avatar would only show this information. He's of legal age to drink and not. And if I then decide to put an extra parameter in that I like Bacardi Coke, and between the hours of 4 and 5 on my way home, I'm open to marketing. When I walk by a bar, they can do a push notification to my cell phone to say, hey, Joe, come in. We'll give you $1 off a drink or something like this. Then this is my choice. But it can't be in a creepy way, the way it's done today, where Amazon takes a picture of you every time you buy something. In case you dispute the purchase, they can show that you're sitting there in your underwear in the back, your wife walking around without anything on, so they can make sure that the $10 pencil that you just bought is you, right? And so there's a lot of creepiness going on, which, in my opinion, DLT can solve. And we talked about this already, DIKW pyramid. Data in itself is meaningless and will become even more meaningless because we're in such a big ocean where we don't know how to figure it out, right? If I take this data and I bring it to the level of information, in my case, cars and the speed, etc., that's already pretty good. If I now bring it into the knowledge level, it's even more valuable, but the ultimate end game is the wisdom, right? If I can create wisdom based on the data that my IoT environment, my smart city, like we heard before, is generating, then I can be making very, very interesting decisions. Because we could sit here, in my case, with autonomous vehicles and wait for smarter infrastructure, for better roads, but let's face it, Chicago is broke, the state is broke, the country is broke. When is it going to happen, right? So we have enough data that we can create wisdom and be much, much smarter about how we route our traffic, how we move people, how we move goods, etc. And here in Chicago, we have a very unique opportunity because we are a central hub to this nation, and a lot of railroads are coming through here, all the roads are coming through here. So from a new mobility perspective, this is very, very amazing. But this pyramid will stand and fall with, again, the ability to authenticate the source of the information and to make sure that the data stream is not manipulated. So to wrap it up, when I talk about the car, I talk about the vehicle to become its own economic agent. And this is a little bit out. If someone came to me right now and said, okay, Joe, I like this idea, build it for me, please, that would be not yet possible. But there is things that are possible today. So as one example, if the temperature goes down here in Chicago, we have black ice. If a vehicle travels down the street, the modern vehicles pick this up, and it's a certain part of the vehicle that picks up this information. But again, if we wait till the end of the day, when we download the information to the cloud in Sweden, and some data analyst looks at it maybe in 2 weeks from now, it's irrelevant. It has to be contextual data in real time, which is why it has to stay on the edge and the fog. So in our vision here, not the OEM, not the Ford or the Daimler, but the brake system provider, might it be a Bosch or a Denso, who picks up on this black ice, communicates this to the next infrastructure position. So for example, the lamppost. So we do a V2X or V2I, vehicle to infrastructure communication, say, hey, I'm a trusted source because I'm a certified brake system on a vehicle. I have detected black ice here. It's this time right now and on this day. The lamppost confirms this information and then starts broadcasting this information to oncoming other vehicles. Not to everyone in Chicago or not to everyone in Illinois or even statewide, because it's only relevant in this hyper-local scenario in Wacker in Michigan in this example. And then when the temperature gets to 50 degrees and the black ice is gone, the lamppost stops broadcasting this information because there is no more black ice, which has been confirmed by other oncoming vehicles. Let's say this car, not the car has a wallet, but the brake system itself has a wallet, gets rewarded for this because it's the first brake system that is reporting this black ice. And after it's confirmed, we do a microtransaction of 0.001 cents. And I still have this data all on the edge. Now we're going to 50 degrees and there is no more black ice. I stop broadcasting and now I write one record into the blockchain that says on this day, from this time to this time, there was black ice, because there might be someone interested in this historic data one day. Maybe the city of Chicago's Department of Transportation or IDOT wants to know and sees there's a lot of black ice occurrence. Maybe they can change something on the road. But for us to take these 4 terabytes of data of 500 vehicles that come across the same spot, detect the same black ice, just for the sake of using the vacuum cleaner approach, is just not making any sense, at least the way we view the world. And again, if you think this guy is smoking a lot of still, I guess, illegal things here in Illinois, Jaguar Land Rover's iPace has a wallet and has pothole detection. So now the vehicle, when it sees a pothole, is providing this information on an IOTA DLT. Now it's a two-sided marketplace. There still has to be someone who's interested in this pothole information, but it's there. And it's a certified source. And it really does exist. And so if you go further out into this, the car will have a wallet, so you don't have to take out your wallet anymore for the drive-through payment of your morning coffee, which again, these are use cases that I'm not excited about because I don't know if you know this, but McDonald's had this solution for the iPass many, many years ago. The reason they never launched it, so your iPass would have paid for your coffee. The reason they never launched it, because it was running, was because McDonald's and iPass could not agree on the revenue share of this model, how much would each get paid, right? So this is not a IoT, wow, my brain is exploding, or a DLT use case. But when you think about it, again, road usage, we have in Illinois now seen that all our infrastructure budget is financed by the gas tax with the oncoming electric vehicles. Now the registration fees have been increased, etc. I could make it very easy for people out of state to pay for the amount of road that they use. And then even in a way, I'm not going to say penalize people that have to drive a pickup truck in downtown Chicago, which to me as a German is still very weird, but it's also weird to me that Germans need to drive SUVs in these tiny little cities. But you know, there's a reason for everything, right? You can incent the right behavior, going back to using the infrastructure much better, maybe less width on the vehicles. We could run an extra lane on certain highways, etc. And then as we monetize this data, we're going to see something that's very important to our mayor, is very important to a lot of other people in the world of the top 40 cities, and that's this inclusive economic growth and creating equity, right? If we monetize the data in a smart way, it is absolutely envisionable that we would provide rideshare services to the underserved or unserved monetarily free. You know, we have people here in Chicago who say, I don't have work because I don't have a car, I don't have a car because I don't have work. We could provide them with these services monetarily free in exchange of their data. And these are also things that we can do today. And then again, you know, when people say, well, if all the electric vehicles came home every night and plugged in, the electric grid would break down. Yes, but it's a sad day, in my opinion, if everyone comes home at the same time and plugs in their car. I'm going to turn this around. If I have an electric vehicle, we don't use it during the week, so it sits there. It could very easily be used as a peak time buffer for Exelon, for ComEd, right? If ComEd would incent me to plug in my car, and when they have excess negative rate electricity, they charge my battery, and during peak times they take the capacity back out. So there could be a mesh network of batteries, and we're starting to look into those kinds of things as well. How do you incent this? This is a pure machine-to-machine play, pure IoT, and this again where I see DLT to be playing a major role. So this is the end of my presentation. Am I doing good on time? Yeah, a little bit of time for QA? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So as I said, I'm not technical. When I started listening to some of the presentations, I can't understand exactly what Vijay is doing with his stuff, but if I might have to disappoint you with I don't know. But if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.